Content warning. This video discusses true crime, real serial killers, and gruesome subject matter.
My last video about Killing Stalking went into SangBum and the references to horror stories such as American Psycho, Psycho, and Misery. In this video, I'd like to talk about the inspiration from true crime found in this comic. There are haters and even some fans who treat Killing Stalking like an actual true crime. I realized this after I started watching The Girl From Plainsville, and then saw a Killing Stalking fan make a big deal out of whether Killing Stalking is romantic or not. I see their love as a dark romance, and as two people who found somebody who would accept the other's flaws. And this kind of extreme shipping you can do in fiction, it doesn't really matter. And I went more into this in my SangBum video. Real life stories about toxic relationships touch my heart in a deeper way. When I contemplate true crime, I'm touched by the suffering of real victims. I think we could compare Sang-woo and Bum to Bonnie and Clyde, a famous crime couple. Partners in crime isn't always what it's cracked up to be. I think Coogie knew this. Many people say victims of toxic and/or abusive relationships tend to fall into them repeatedly. This was likely the case with Bonnie and Roy, and then Bonnie and Clyde. Roy was a criminal, like Clyde, who had physically abusive tendencies. He left Bonnie alone for periods of time until finally it was too much, and their paths never crossed again. Documented by Blanche Barrow, Clyde's sister-in-law and fellow member of the Barrow gang. There were several physical fights between the couple. For example, Clyde knocked Bonnie across the bedroom a couple of times, but she got up and went back for more. Blanche also noted Bonnie and Clyde loved one another too much to live without each other. Their passionate love did little to erase the physical abuse, however. I hope that more people learn to look for red flags and avoid unhealthy relationships in real life. Learning to spot red flags is more helpful than stigmatizing comics like Killing Stalking. Fiction doesn't have to educate you, but it has to entertain you. Some people hate Sang-woo as if he is a real, actual serial killer. I'm so used to dissecting Killing Stalking as a work of fiction and fantasy that I can strongly separate this comic from true crime. To me, Sang-woo is a symbol of hetero-patriarchal misogyny. The way he hates and kills women reminds me of Ted Bundy and Ed Kemper. Oh man, Ed Kemper. Ed Kemper was 6'9" and had a high IQ. I wonder sometimes if Sang-woo's large stature and intelligence was inspired by him, along with the large, twunky top trope. There was also a moment Sang-woo said something that was very close to a specific Ed Kemper quote.
You know what I think when I see a girl as hot and skinny as her? I wonder what would happen if I were to jab that pretty empty head with the long, thick metal rod. When I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part wants to be real nice and sweet, and the other part wonders what her head would look like on a stick.
The way Sang-woo treats Bum reminds me of how Jeffrey Dahmer treated his kidnapped victims. There is a moment when Bum tries to get help and is treated suspiciously. This reminded me of when a victim almost got away from Jeffrey Dahmer, but was brought back to him by the police. Tapes of the police call to dispatchers from the scene in Milwaukee, in the U.S. state of Wisconsin, reveals an officer saying, "The intoxicated Asian naked male," laughter in background, was returned to his sober boyfriend. Shortly after, Sandra's worried mom called police to ask if anything was done to help the boy. An investigating officer said there was nothing to worry about and dismissed the mother's insistence that Konorak was a child. The truth was that Konorak had been lured to the apartment, drugged, and attacked before he escaped when Dahmer was out buying beer. Also similar to the result of the police station debacle when Sang-woo played victim to homophobic police brutality. Sang-woo and Ted Bundy were both directionless and unmotivated when it came to education and work. Ted Bundy hopped from job to job. He dropped out of multiple universities. Sang-woo's mommy issues remind me of Ed Gein. Ed Gein inspired several fictional characters, including Norman Bates and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre guy. Ed got hooked on porn and pulp horror novels and became fascinated by Nazi atrocities and medical experiments. He read medical encyclopedias and books on anatomy. He was especially interested in female anatomy. He started grave robbing cemeteries in Wisconsin, digging up recently buried female corpses. He would dissect most of them and return them to their crypts, seemingly undisturbed, keeping heads, hearts, sex organs, livers, and intestines as trophies. Gein later admitted that he brought home the bodies of women he thought resembled his mother. He tanned the bodies' skins and experimented with human taxidermy. Police said he practiced necrophilia, but Gein maintained that he never had sex with the bodies he dug up because they smelled too bad. Psychonovelist Bloch lived about 35 miles away from Plainfield when Gein was arrested. He read local reports and picked up details like that psychiatrists suspected Gein's clothing made of women's skin was intended to help with the fantasy that he was his dead mother. Bloch didn't know how close his fictitious Norman Bates was to the real Ed Gein until after the book was published and the country learned more about the quiet mama's boy farmer. Sang-woo maintained his mother's corpse, calling to how Ed Gein, Ed Kemper, and Jeffrey Dahmer had all kept memorabilia. I think Coogie must have read a lot of true crime to write such compelling characters and cause readers to empathize with such deeply disturbed characters like Sang-woo and Bum. I feel bad that Killing Stalking was created at a time many people are more comfortable complaining about comics and their fans over the actual red flags of real-life predatory sickos.